Aerodynamics is not just about speed. It is about erasing resistance. It is about the brutal, uncompromising war between a human engine and the air itself. We spend our lives fighting the wind, but in 1992, one machine decided to stop fighting and start flowing. This is the story of the Lotus 108. It was a machine that looked like it belonged in a classified fighter jet hangar, not on a wooden velodrome track. It was alien, aggressive, and utterly beautiful in its violent rejection of everything we knew about cycling. To understand why the Lotus 108 was so terrifying to the establishment, you have to look at the history of the bicycle. For nearly 100 years, the design of the racing bike hadn't changed. It was the classic diamond frame, thin steel tubes, welded together at specific angles. From the early days of the Tour de France to the late 1980s, riders got stronger, training got harder, but the machine itself was frozen in time. The governing body of cycling, the UCI, liked it this way. They believed the sport should be a test of human suffering, not a test of engineering. But progress cannot be stopped forever. In the late 80s, an eccentric engineer named Mike Burrows was working in his garage in England. Burrows didn't care about the traditions of cycling. He only cared about physics. Burrows looked at the traditional bicycle and saw an aerodynamic disaster. Round tubes create massive drag. Spinning spokes act like an air brake. He realized that to go faster, you had to stop building a frame out of pipes and start molding it out of single, continuous shape. He began experimenting with a relatively new material in the cycling world, carbon fiber. He built a prototype that was a monocoque, a single shell with no joints. It looked bizarre, but when he tested it, the numbers were staggering. It was unbelievably fast. Burrows' design was brilliant, but it lacked the funding and the precision manufacturing to take it to the world stage. That is, until a rogue engineer from Lotus Cars saw the prototype. Lotus was famous for building some of the fastest Formula One cars in history. When the aerodynamics team at Lotus examined Burrows' bike, they knew exactly what they were looking at. They took his raw concept and fed it into their state-of-the-art computer systems and wind tunnels. They refined the carbon fiber layup. They shaped the frame to slice through the air like a blade. They invented a monoblade fork. The result was the Lotus 108. It wasn't just a bicycle anymore. It was an unpowered aircraft. But a machine is nothing without an engine. They needed a rider who could match the ruthless efficiency of the bike. They found him in Chris Boardman, a track pursuit specialist known for his obsessive, almost robotic approach to training. Imagine sitting on this machine. You aren't riding it. You're wearing it. The ergonomic profile forced Boardman into an extreme aerodynamic tuck. His arms rested on custom-molded pads. His back was completely flat. This position was incredibly painful to maintain. It restricted his breathing. It crushed his lungs. Boardman was not just a cyclist here. He was a component, a vital, sweating, suffering part of a larger aerospace project that happened to have pedals. The stage was set. The 1992 Olympics in Barcelona. When Chris Boardman wheeled the Lotus 108 onto the velodrome track, the crowd fell silent. His opponents stared in absolute disbelief. He looked like an alien who had invaded a traditional sporting event. The track pursuit race is a brutal event. Two riders start on opposite sides of the track and chase each other. It requires a level of intensity that shreds muscles. Boardman didn't just win his heats. He broke the world record twice. In the final race for the gold medal, Boardman turned it into a slaughter. Moving at terrifying speeds, he physically caught the world champion, Jens Lehmann, on the track. Catching your opponent in an Olympic final is almost unheard of. It was total, humiliating annihilation. The world celebrated the victory, but behind closed doors in Switzerland, the governing body of cycling, the UCI, watched in absolute horror. They saw a machine that rendered the human athlete secondary. They saw a terrifying future where the wealthiest teams with the biggest wind tunnels would dominate the sport. They feared that bicycle racing was turning into Formula One. They called it an unfair advantage. They argued that the pure spirit of the sport was dying. So, they didn't try to beat the bike on the track. They defeated it with a pen. In 1996, the UCI introduced the Lugano Charter, a devastating set of rules designed to banish aerodynamic innovation forever. The decree was absolute. All frames must be composed of a traditional diamond shape. No monocoques, no aniquilguilsaisis. The Lotus 108 and all the brilliant designs that followed it were legislated out of existence.
The UCI thought that by banning the bike, they were saving the soul of cycling. But what they actually did was freeze technological progress for an entire generation. Today, every time you see a modern professional race bike, look closer. Look at the way the carbon bends around the wheels. Look at the flattened aerodynamic tubes. You're seeing the ghost of the 108. You're seeing the technology that they were too afraid to let evolve, slowly creeping back into the sport. The machine was banned, but the physics it proved remain absolute. You can silence the bike, but you cannot silence the wind. The 108 wasn't just a bicycle. It was a warning that the future cannot be contained by ink on a rulebook. Until the next investigation, keep the files open. File closed. Next file. A chain. A paradox. And a machine that should not work at all. The bike files. Subscribe for the next case.